Kalisperasas. So good afternoon to everybody. First of all, let me thank you to Sofia, Alexandra, thank you for inviting us to this great moment of this great meeting point where I'm glad to be. And thank you also, Manos, for your amazing explanation. I have to admit that we are going to share some of the images, so that is great. I'm going to talk about Eduardo Chillida, about my grandfather. I mean, I think that Chillida is an amazing artist of this last century, of course, but I think he was even a better human. So I'm going to try to explain you why I think this, and I want to try to explain what he did in life. So give you some places to put your feet and to be able to look to his work, but from your own point of view. So I have added some kind of sentences of my grandfather because it's interesting to see how he thought. And this is something that I always try to repeat to myself, that there is nothing that has done more for culture than desire to know of those who do not know. I mean, it's the most important thing, the need of the need of a question in a life. My grandfather based all his work in questions. That's what he had during all his life, once and again, and that's his work, a succession of questions. So I have tried to articulate this talk. It's just 30 minutes. It's not so much time. It's hard to resume a life in 30 minutes. But I will start from, of course, the life before art. As you said, Manos, he was an athlete. He was even a football player for a period of time. And also it's important the relation, the link he had with the Greek art, which he loved. So these are like the key points which I have selected for this talk, and let's go. So, life before art. They were three brothers in a very regular family in the Basque Country. He is the oldest of the three of them. Sadly, the smallest one passed away in an accident, a motorbike accident, when he was in his 20s. But Eduardo and Gonzalo both were artists. That is quite amazing because his father was a military and his mother was a singer, a soprano, so the art was over there, but not in an unexpected way. These are Eduardo and Pili, my grandparents. My grandmother is a very relevant figure, a main character in my grandfather's life, absolutely. Without my grandmother, my grandfather would have been an amazing artist, but maybe nobody will know him because she was like the contact with the earth. My grandfather was an artist, but an artist needs something else, not just art. That was my grandmother. As you say, Manos, my grandfather in his younghood, he was an athlete, and he played in Real Sociedad for 1 year in the soccer team. He had a terrible injury in the last match of the first season he played with 18 years old. That was a terrible injury, so he had to quit sports. And believe me, in that moment, he was so upset. He really wanted to be a goalkeeper. And the most interesting thing is, years after, when he was an well-known artist in the world internationally, when journalists usually ask him about his past, like a football player, like something that was, how could an international artist that you are, a sculptor, could be a soccer player, a football player? That was like something very strange. And his answer was amazing. He said that during all his life, he had been always working with the same elements, even when he was a goalkeeper and now that he was a sculptor. Time and space, and the intersection between both of them. He always said that the goal, the area in a football pitch is with the goal makes a diedro, but makes the only three-dimensional area in a football court, and it's where all the active actions happen in a football match, and the goalkeeper is the only one which is facing this action and trying to measure time and space all the time. I have to say that also he studied architecture after quitting football and all the sports. He moved into architecture. He studied for 2 years in Madrid, but after 2 years, he realized that he was not in the proper place, because for him, what he said was that the architecture was an art focused on answers, and he was much more interested on questions. That's why he moved to art. I think that he need to go out of the practicity of the architecture. Of course, it's an art, but you are also focused on a need. But the art is just focused on the question, not on the answer. That was the most interesting thing. And that's why he moved into art. He started to draw in the Fine Arts Circle in Madrid. He had an amazing ability to draw. He drew perfect bodies. He had the technique, but that for him was not enough. And one night, after thinking carefully about how far he was from art in these kind of beautiful drawings, he did one interesting thing. He started to draw with the left hand, like an exercise for himself. And what he found was that once he forget, or he was able to quit the technique, the ability of drawing, suddenly time appeared. And with time, you have time for the soul, for the heart, for the head. All of them, they appear on the left-handed drawing, not in the right-handed one. That was a beautiful drawing, but that was far away from what he thought was art, and not in the left. It was not so beautiful, but that was much closer to art. In a way, he was trying to say that in art, the beautiness, it's a limit, and you have to go through it, over it. Art is always behind the beautiness. As I have tried to explain, this is art for Eduardo Chillida. So art is a very open space, and it's place for all kinds of arts and ways to look for it. So he moved to Paris when he was in 1948, when he was 24 years old, trying to find the art. Let's say he said to Pili, in that moment they were a great couple, and he said, Pili, if you follow me, I'm moving to France because I am going to be a sculptor. Pili, which was an amazing woman, he said, okay, let's go. And they moved to Paris. And there, it's like these first years were very influenced by the Greek art. He loved Phidias, for example, the sculptor, the classical sculptor. And during these 3 years, all the works he did, this is his first sculpture, first of all of them, from 1948, which is called Forma, shape. And there is a clear influence of the Greek light, of the Greek essence of an sculptor. And he was, in a way, let's say, I would say, trapped in that Mediterranean, white, amazing light that he loved. But that started to be a problem in a way. So this is kind of trying to find some images to talk about this essence of his work, how he was so influenced in this point with the Greek art. He used to go to museums to see all the work he was able to. So after 3 years, this is when he get back to the Basque Country. That's another of the sculptures, that is Torso, which is like body of his works in 1949 made in plaster. And he had to get out of that place. And that was incredible because for that year, Mehmet, the gallerist, had shown one of his works, the very first one in the Salon du Mai of Paris in 1949. That was something really amazing for a novel artist who has just arrived to Paris. But the problem was that he started to feel very upset with himself, with the art, because he started to felt one thing, was that he was trying to do things which were already done. That was an already done trip, and he had to avoid that feeling of doing things which are already done, to try to find his own way, his own sculpture, his own language in a way. So in 1948, he had to get out of Paris, and he get back to the Basque Country. That's where he found the iron, the space, the limit of the space. So he write one amazing thing when he was coming back from Paris, and was, I have yesterday's hands, I need tomorrow's. For him, the art was always going towards unknown. And the only way to do that is avoiding to do doing the same. I mean, avoid the knowledge in a way. I'm not saying that he didn't want to know. Of course, he wanted to know a lot of things. But art was not about knowledge. Art was about the moment you know things. The technician works in the knowledge. Once he knows something, he applies it once and again, and there is a lot of value for him. But for the artist, you live in that moment when you know things for the first time, and you must keep on moving all the time. That is art. That is what he thought that was art. That's why he refused to work casted works. He did not melt the steel. Each work was done in the traditional Basque, universal way to work the iron, in the forge, like a smithy. So that's what he started to do. In the first years, the sculptures, they are based on pre-worked iron pieces. He was trying to learn how to work in iron, but the work itself is about the space. What he said was that the space is something quite interesting, and it's something that is that we humans are not able to understand properly. I mean, the humanity has given a measure to the space, and that makes a space very simple, but the space is something else. And he said that when a space is open, we are not able even to feel the measure of a space, to understand the space properly. But when we put a limit on a space, suddenly we understand it, we activate it in a way. So it was a way to say that the sculptures, the iron, it's a perfect material that to cut the space. It makes a perfect, proper, very sharp limit into the space. And once you limited it, it activates itself. It's like an inner space, which is, like pom pom, breathing, your body itself. That the space inside the sculpture is making this kind of movement, and that makes that space really active in his work. This is a picture of the Triennale of Milan in 1954. And again, you see that space, that inner space in that work, even with the shadow, is creating another inner spaces. They are activating themselves. They are like breathing into the sculpture. It's interesting also how he approached to iron. Once he get back from Paris, he was really lucky because one of his aunts let him a house to live in Hernani, in the village very close to San Sebastian. And just in front of the house was the smithy, was the blacksmith of Hernani. And he saw the fire, he saw the iron, he saw something really interesting. What he saw was, or what he said was that I was trying to work in that white Mediterranean light, which is not mine, and I had to come back to my black Atlantical light, my black dark Atlantical light, the iron, the fire, to find myself. So it's a way to say that art is nothing that comes from the outside. That is a technique, and the technique is great, but technique is knowledge. You can do great things with technique, but do they matter in art? Or what matters is all the rest, which comes from inside, not from outside. So that is a little bit the feeling. So what you see in this work is that he's trying to work. Even you see that he's trying to learn a lot about the material itself, how it can develop, how you can cut it, you can again bend it, you can weld it, you can manage the space itself. He always said that he could do a sculpture because of the space itself. The space is the one who gives him the chance to construct on it. So the space is something really interesting and something very powerful. And also this is one of these, I would say, this kind of hit or key points. All his work, it's solid, it's massive. Each time you see a Chillida's work, you know what is it, in the way that if there is a space in his work, you are going to be able to see it. And if you don't see a space, it's because it's full of material. It's as simple as that. Why? Because he said, if you create a space which is not viewable for us, for the one who are looking to the work, it's like if you are taking out all the value of the space itself. So if you have something that has value, you will show it. That's why space should be viewable always in his work. It's as simple as that. So this is a sentence he wrote, and I thought it was quite interesting because he was talking about this idea of the space, something that is alive even in the sculpture. So I will read it because this is too hard to say by heart. So space, sculptures are a function of space. I'm not talking about the space that is outside the form, that surrounds the volume and in which the form live. But I am talking about the space that the forms create, that lives in them, and that is all the more active, the more hidden it acts. I could compare it to the breath that makes the form breathe and contract again, that opens up in the space of vision that is impenetrable and hidden from the outside world. For me, this is not something abstract, but a reality that is as physical as the volume that envelopes it. This space should be as perceivable as the form in which it manifests itself. It has expressive qualities. It seems in motion, the matter that configurates it, determines its proportions, measures, and order its rhythms. So it's this idea we've been talking about. This is the Biennale of Venezia of 1958. I would say, is probably the most important moment in his career, because it's the moment when he suddenly becomes international, universal in a way, with this work in iron, coming back to the roots and working in what is inside, not outside.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Paolo Portoghese, il presidente del Biennale.
Yes.
San Giorgio Maggiore.
This is a lovely picture, and yeah, absolutely. So, at this point, 1963, the return to the white light. As I told you, when he came back from Paris, he tried to avoid the white Mediterranean light. And let me explain you that in those years, when he get into a museum, he never get into the Greek room. He always closed his eyes like this. He didn't get into the rooms because he was, as he said, he was permeable. He loved that. And that was a big problem. He said that it was like, the songs of the sirens to Ulysses, that you're going to crash with the rocks. So he tried to avoid them until he saw this sculpture. When he saw a Victoria de Samotracha, this beautiful hand in Paris, he was shocked. He spent all the morning looking to this sculpture. And when he get back to Pili, to my grandmother, he said, Pili, I have spent all the morning looking to a Greek work, and it has done nothing but to me. I'm recovered. So let's go to Greece. I have to get back to that space, which I've been really willing to go, but I was so afraid. So in these years, he construct his dialogue, his material. He always said that he was like a tree, the roots in the place where you belong to, and the arms open as leaves to the world. So that is important. He was very aware of where he belonged. Not when he went to Paris, yes, when he get back to Hernani. He belonged to a place. He used to say that his work was the work of a Basque man. It was a Basque work because he was a Basque man, for that simple reason. So it was, he was aware of this, not trying to avoid. He didn't like the idea of being universal as something like abstract. He said, no, okay, I am universal, but I am a Basque universal. Don't forget never where you came from, because it's a point where you are in contact with reality, with the input. So you are a kind of filter even. So be aware of that. So after that, he did, of course, he said, Pili, let's go to Greece. They did a beautiful trip into Greece, 3 months, traveling, Cyclades, all these amazing places with Messier Clayet, was the director of the MECT gallery, and Pili. This is the workshop of Phidias. So he enjoyed it really, really a lot. And it was a very, a key point in his career, because after that trip, this is years later, because I have not found a better picture working the alabaster, but he get in touch again with the alabaster, with the light, and with architecture in a way. So this is something really interesting, the alabasters. He arrived to them after that trip to Greece, letting again the light get into the work. As I said, iron is about the space, about limiting the space. But alabaster is not about the space, it's about light. This is another thing. There is a change of paradigm. All this material, and also this is carving in a stone. This is also something quite Greek. You are taking out all which is not deserved. The sculpture is already there. You just have to arrive to it. So following an intuition, which is also very something that we will talk about, the present, this is about light. You see the light pulling the material, getting inside. So it changes the way to approach to the work. Yeah. As I say, here there are 2 interesting things. One is the present. I have just mentioned the present. My grandfather loved to work on the present. On the moment things happened. He used to say that the present is this very strange thing. It's a point which has not a measure, which is between 2 giants, past and future, but everything always happens on the present. So you must be very sharp, very clear in the moment things happen. And he was always trying to work in that moment, because if you work in this way, following an intuition in a way, you are also adding another thing to the equation. You are respecting the material. If you, before doing a work, you know how the work is going to be, you are not listening to the material. You are not open to it. You have closed all the possibilities. But if you are working in that moment, you are in a continuous dialogue with materials, listening to them, following them. He used to talk about this with the example of water. Water, no? We can take water wherever we want if we just follow one simple law. The water goes always down. It's always trying to rebel and search for the horizontal. If we respect that law, we can take water from a point A to a point B, wherever it is. If we don't respect this law, technique could solve it, but naturally we would not be able to do that. And he said, with my work, I do the same. I want to arrive to a point, but I will only be able to arrive to that point if the material also wants to arrive. If the material does not want, I will not be able. That's very important. That's why he always had a huge respect towards materials, always. And this is following the material, following the lines, the structure, the light, how it works. And then there is also something very interesting, which is the issue of the angles. My grandfather also is well known because of his public sculptures, but also because of his commitment with this social, problems. Peace, dialogue, tolerance. He was always working in these terms, towards these values. He said that he was aware of his position in the world, and he wanted to do the good with this position, talking about these issues. Works like, in Munster, there is a sculpture which are two benches, one in front of the other. It's called Dialogue Tolerance. It's for the commemoration of the signature of the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. The one in Berlin, the reunification, the Monument of the Tolerance in Sevilla, because to close the wound of the Inquisition. So he was very aware of these issues. And I will say that this is not just in the name of the sculptors, this is also in the way they are worked. Of course, this idea of following, respecting the material is one of them, but another one is the angle. He said that the 90 degrees angle was a very beautiful angle, but it had a horrible problem. Is that it's an angle which does not dialogue with any other angles, which is not himself. And that is not tolerance. Dialogue is talk with the ones which are not equals. So he didn't use the 90 degrees angle in his work. He used, in fact, what Greeks you call the nomon, that angle of the life with the horizontal. The shadow, the human with his own shadow. That angle is never 90 degrees because the 90 degrees does not exist in the natura, but it's always very close. So it's a range of angles between 88 and 92 degrees. He worked always this angle because you are able to close a square with 4 different angles. And that is dialogue. That is tolerance. Talk with others which are not equals as you. So please check it as you have the chance. Go to any of his sculptures and try to find a 90 degrees angle.
Excuse me.
Yes?
How is the type?
Okay, this is the match to the sea.
No.
The
It's-
dimensions.
The dimensions is like this more.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an alabaster bowl. Alabaster is a calcium. It remains in the deserts when it rains. The sand makes a kind of filter, and the calcium remains. With time, it creates a big bowl of alabaster. So then it takes the bowl and starts to carve into it, trying to find which is in the alabaster itself.
It's very tender.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to work because it's soft. The marble is much stronger, but this is such a translucent material that he loved the properties of the alabaster.
It's not very, very strong like
No, nothing like, yeah. They are the most delicate works of my grandfather. The iron ones, they are great because be careful if you hit them. And yes, and I have to say that this is the other thing he was doing at that time, creating an amazing family. Also my grandmother, an amazing family, because my grandmother used to say that he had not 8 children, that he had 9. His 8 children and Eduardo. So, yes.
Lovely. This is my father.
Okay, so I will not talk too much about public works because Nausicaa is going to talk about that. But I just wanted the chance to try to see a little bit of this kind of work, because we have been talking about the respect to the material, towards the material, how he worked in what I would say respectful way to him, and this is really interesting. And in this picture there is a lot to talk about. First of all, we have to imagine one thing. These kind of guys, the guys in the industry, in the forging industry, because he always worked in the forge, never in the foundry. He did not melt the steel and use a mold. He worked in a forge, bending the steel. This is to bend it, to work with material, but in a respectful way. And let me explain you why. Because if you make a mold and you create a shape, what he said was that if you melt steel, you are taking out all the dignity of the steel. Because the steel is something strong, something powerful, and you are making it, something, a liquid, which is nothing like, and that was not respecting the material. And working in this way, which is much harder, it has one thing that happens, which is amazing. Now, I'm going to...
But if you look, when you make these movements into the steel,
what happens is that when you bend, the material reacts. So if you look carefully
to this piece, in this side,
there will be a compression, a depression, there is a movement. That is not the human's language. My grandfather wants a shape, but the material reacts and has another shape, which is still his own language. That's the most amazing thing. When you look to his work, let's say that you are seeing the human, the shape, the formal shape he wants to give to the sculpture, but you are also seeing the material, the natura, reacting, still preserving its own language. That's why his work feels like if it's part of the natura, because it's respected, and still is still still. You can feel it. And that's why it's a work that works so well in public spaces, because you feel that it's a natural thing. It belongs to the place itself. It belongs to the land, and it belongs to the place. And then, this idea of working with these guys, the guys of the industry, they are the guys who most know about the iron in the world, but they have never done nothing like that, because they work with a plan, with an engineer giving them a roadmap. They had a very practical ending, and once they finished one thing, they did it once and again and again and again, because the value for the industry was replying what they did. They did one thing and they did thousands of times, because that was a business in a way. And suddenly, a sculptor arrived there and they did one thing, working for several months with a big group of people. And once they finished, it was like, always the first time they work in Legazpi in this factory, one of the guys arrived to him when they finished and he said, "Eduardo, next time we will do it perfectly." And my grandfather said, "But we are not going to do that again." And this guy was like, "Come on, what are you telling me? Now that we know how to do it." And my grandfather said, "That's why we are not going to do it again, because now we know. We must not know again for the next time." And this guy he could not believe what he was doing. That was the most interesting thing. I remember when we opened the museum again in 2019, I had a visit, and it was the granddaughter of one of these guys who worked with my grandfather. And he said to me, "Okay, Mikel, you don't know how your grandfather changed the life of my grandfather." I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "Before working with your grandfather, when my grandfather had to do something, one work, I don't know, 1,000, this piece of, I don't care, who cares? He just put the machine, pull 1,000 pieces. And he said, after working with your grandfather, the next time they asked him again to do the same piece, he was looking, trying to see what was happening in that moment. The piece was the same before and after, but the guy, the human, had changed it completely. Now he was aware, trying to see what was happening in the world, in the material, in that moment, in that present. For me, that was something shocking, really, because the human was another one. capacity, his ability of questioning his things, that changed it. And that is the power of art to change people. Okay, this is the sculpture which is in the World Bank in Washington, D.C. It's a public monument. Rumor de Límites, I don't remember the name of the number of the series, but was one of these guys the one who asked about, we are not going to do this again? Yes, was one of these ones, so that's great. Okay, public works, Houston also. Granite, yes, lovely material. This is a hard song, Abesti Gogorra, hard song in English, and mostly this series is in wood, which is amazing. I'm talking about series, and I have not explained this because I think it's important also. I said that he did not cast works. Each work is unique. But a lot of times you will see that the names of the sculptures, they are the same with a Roman number after the name. That means, for example, this is the number 5, because I don't remember properly, but maybe I think it's 5. It does not mean that is the 5th time he does the same sculpture. It means that is the 5th time he makes himself the same question. But each time he makes himself the question, his present is another one. He is another one. He is growing on time. So the work, which is question as answer, is different. This is also beautiful work in the Castellana street in Madrid, the main street, which is working against gravity, lugar de encuentros, meeting point. And I think that the meeting point, which is a series of my grandfather, is one of the best ways to explain what he has done in his life. He was a creator of meeting points, places in a way. Okay, Come of the Wind. This is an absolute masterpiece, and I can just smile when I look to these pictures because it's something, what he achieved in these places it's astonishing, it's amazing. Same picture. Manos, this is a picture of Cata Roca, an amazing picture. So, just a couple of things because Nausicaa is going to talk about these things, but yeah, this is, in this case, my grandfather said that this work, this monument, this public monument, was an answer to an equation which has not numbers, but has elements. Stones, the sea, the horizon, the city. This is an edge, a limit. In the back is the city. In front, you have the horizon. He used to go to this place since he was a child. He loved this place. And in that spot, that was, a horrible place in the city. Nothing happened there. It was just where the fluvial waters of the city finished. But he went there to see the horizon, the waves. He wrote this beautiful sentence. It was the homage to the saludo, the greeting to Johann Sebastian Bach. He said, modern as the waves, ancient as the sea. Always never different, never always the same. The natura is this thing which is pretty amazing. Each wave is unique, is different. It could be never the same. But the sea, where they came from, is always the same. There is something very poetical in this way to look to the horizon, to look to the sea, to look to the waves. And the question is, what is this natura, which is so powerful, and what we are, the city that we have behind, because this is a limit between both. It's a place that does not belong to the natura, not to the humans, but it's a place that belongs to both at the same time. And you feel that you are out of your comfort area. You are not in the city pass. This is granite. It's a little bit uncomfortable because you must feel that you are out of your place. This is not the city. This is not a human place. It's something between human and natura. And it's a place to confront that horizon, that limit, the unknown of the natura. And it's great because there are 3 pieces, not just one. This was a big project. It started in the 60s. He wanted to do just one piece, but it developed in the 70s. And what happened was in that time, the idea evolved. And with 3, he was much happier because with one sculpture, you will always look to the sculpture, and that would be the sculpture. But with 3, everything is part of the work. The space, the horizon, the sea. Some beautiful pictures there. This is Cosme with Eduardo. Cosme de Barañano, great friend and curator, and yes. And the eulogy of the horizon, again, the horizon. You see, he asked himself a lot of questions about the same things because he never get to the answers. About the horizon, he said one thing which is pretty interesting. He asked himself about if the horizon was not the homeland of all humans. because if you look one to others from a human distance, we see the differences. But if you go to our limit, which is the horizon, and you look to us from that limit, you realize that we are all the same, exactly the same. That is not the place where we belong to, the place where we are all the same. So that, and this work is, looking to the horizon with a window to the cosmos, trying to make this kind of idea of a scale and to make ourselves this kind of questions. This is the work of Berlin when he was working on it, and of course this is something pretty amazing to arrive to this place and to work with these people.
It's North Country.
Is this
The North Country.
It's in Sidenor, in Cantabria, Reynosa. Yeah, it was the biggest factory in those years in Europe, in the north of Spain, and this was the limit of steel piece he was able to work, 90 per 90 centimeters, the absolute limit. As you see, always trying to push the limits. When he gets into the factories, he used to work small works that he called aromas, not sketches, aromas, because you must follow an intuition until you arrive to the work. And he took all the people for this kind of works. There were maybe 30 people working with him. They were a big crews. So he took all the people in a place. He gave them the aroma, which is a proper sculpture. He gave to them, and they all start to look. The engineers, the technicians, the driver of the crane, all of them. They look to the work, one to others. Then they returned to my grandfather. He took the sculpture in the back and he said, "Now we are going to do this in 5 meters high." And they start to look one to others like a little bit nervous. And one of them usually said, "But Eduardo, we don't know how to do this." And he said, "That's why we are going to do it, because we don't know." And he did another thing which is it's beautiful. In the forge, there is always a lot of dust. It's iron dust in the floor. So
he did this kind of task. He make a line with his foot.
He took all the people into the back of the line, and he said, "This is the limit. You have been all your life working at this side of the limit because you have a practical ending. The engineer is going to say, you don't go through this Newton meter hookers." And he said, "With me, that we are going to do art.
We are going to work here. We are going to push the limits, because what he wants,
They were all afraid, of course. He said, "Don't worry. If anything goes wrong, it's my responsibility. It's in my charge." But I think that the limits, which are in paper, they are not the real limits. And I want to push them into the real world. So it's a kind of exercise. That's why he's a practical artist, not a theoretical, because he's trying to achieve what he wants in that moment, in that present, in the real world, in the material. Yeah, and this is a beautiful work, which you have already shown from the other hand. And it's great because this is in Berlin. Is the reunification of the two Germanys, and you see that is also a door, it's a transition. And those two arms, which are trying to grab one to others, but they do not touch. It's not one plus other, it's a new third Germany, which has become a reality between both. So this is just, like a small spoiler about what we're going to talk tomorrow. This is Tabalaga Farmhouse, and you will have to come tomorrow to know more. So just some pictures, because I think this is something, the family now, bigger family. My grandfather, me, I am here. So, we are not 40 as Alexandra, which is around, but we are a lot of big family, growing and growing. And over there also, with my grandparents. This is his best sculpture, the family, believe me. And I didn't see the wind. I saw the clouds move. I didn't see time. I saw the leaves fall. Yeah. Just a bonus picture with Martin Heidegger, because I think it's interesting. Alexander Calder. It's great to remember these moments, because it was a great moment for art and for my grandfather, of course, with Jorge Guillén, the poet. And this is a lovely picture of both of them, Eduardo and Pili, my grandparents, a really amazing relation. And this is where they are now, also in Chillida They did, my grandfather did this cross, and the family is there. So thank you, grandparents. Okay.